Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is George Ortega. I'm here to talk about happiness because happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all.
I love that.
Today we have a very special program for you. The Happiness Show has a new co-host. Her name is Claudia Basson. Claudia is a psychotherapist with a practice here in Scarsdale, New York, right by White Plains. And we're going to be talking about happiness and psychotherapy this session. Before we begin, I'd like Claudia to just describe a bit her work, and then to kind of like describe to the audience why she decided to host the Happiness Show. Welcome to the show, Claudia.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. Happy to be here. I don't know how to describe what I do. I guess, I'm a systems therapist, so everything is about the system that people function in. And I guess ultimately you want people to get happy, or they don't come in and say, listen, I'm not happy. They come in, and they're crying for the first hour at least. So, just goes on from there.
Great. Oh, well, let's get right into it then. Okay, so how does the process of psychotherapy create happiness?
Okay, it's no secret. You sort of, that's the magical part of getting happier, through talking to someone who has a skill. It's good to talk to your friends and family members, perhaps yourself even, but when you have someone reflecting back to you what you're saying and making connections for you in your past and in your current life, connecting the dots, so to say, things just kind of fall into place. I mean, you might come in and think, talking about this is really painful. I don't know if I could do that. I've been thinking about it, kills me, but I don't know about talking about it. But then once they start, and you're sustaining that process, people generally at the end of a session will, if you help them, to just guide them. It's like, I'm a tour guide, and by the time they leave, they might call when they get home and say, I just feel better all of a sudden. I don't know why. It's all about purging, and you could compare it with eating something bad, and when it comes back out, you feel much better. So it's really all about that. It's about starting someplace that's full of pain, and then moving to a place that's, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. So also, I think maybe in a certain sense, while you want that catharsis, that just getting the emotions out, then isn't a lot of it just kind of like, understanding our lives? Because, we don't learn about ourselves like in school, or our parents don't teach us.
That has been my gripe forever. Why is school not about how do we understand ourselves? Self-psychology, self-help, something that's more along the lines of looking at your family tree, learning how to interact with other people. Interacting with people is what we do every single day. Unless you're an absolute hermit, recluse in the mountains of Tibet, you're talking to people pretty much every day. How do we do that? We don't learn these skills. We mess it up a lot, or that there's no how-to, just how to sustain it, how to engage a conversation, how to sustain it. Two basic fundamental things.
Right, I agree with you, because again, according to happiness research, other people are our main source of happiness, and you have these schools teaching us, we've got to learn how to read and write and stuff, but so much about school is about teaching us to go out there and make as much money as we can, when that's not what happiness and that's not what emotional health is about.
Absolutely. Making money, well, that's good. You can buy stuff.
Yeah, but no. Here's the thing. Like, above the poverty line, whether we have 50,000 or 50 million, it just influences happiness very little. Whereas, like, what you were referring to about, like, conversational skills, getting to know other people, how other people work, how we work.
Those are the quick fixes of happiness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Having a great 3-minute conversation with somebody who's online waiting to buy something at Christmas, and the line is out the door, and you're standing with people. It's a nice experience when you're chatting people up. It's much nicer than standing there thinking, what else do I have to do after this? I'll never make it. Just enjoy that moment. I think one of the books that you had given me to read and prep for this,
right.
What was his name? Dr.
Lycan?
Yes, Lycan. He said deriving the pleasure from each moment, something like that. Well, that's what I get out of it anyway.
Absolutely. Well, we just did a show, we taped it, I think, a couple of weeks ago on happiness and living in the present. Because so much of the time, you probably encounter this all the time with your clients, that much of the discomfort and symptomology they feel comes from their fears. They're like future oriented, and a lot of those, they're not like hopes. They're kind of like fears and all. Yeah.
Yeah, well, pretty much everything you either fear it or you wish it. I mean, there's a very simple task to decide, what's going on with me. I must be afraid of the situation, But to do that, that's what it helps. That's where psychotherapy comes in pretty handy.
Gloria, I got to ask you a question. Okay, I imagine you treat clients that present different kinds of symptoms, have different diagnoses and all.
Right.
But have you kind of like keyed in? Is there a fundamental aspect to all of them, kind of like a fundamental theme or something that basically everyone is really in therapy to address or to somehow resolve?
Well, I don't know, a fundamental theme that everyone shares. I think everybody seeks to resolve some issue that has been plaguing them or something they just never looked at. So it could be, and it's subjective, it could be different for every person, it certainly is, but I think generally everybody needs to resolve something, and you could have had the most perfect, happy childhood. I mean, it goes all the way back to, birth. And I think that everybody wants to just get out from under what holds them back. That little tape that goes off in your head that says, no, you can't do that. What is that tape? Where does that come from? Pretty much everybody has some, subconscious, messaging going on that drives their behavior, that causes them to make choices or react to things in a certain way. I think people want to understand that.
Right, and you think, I think there's part of that may be just about understanding, that they don't understand enough about like life or about their perhaps main goal, which is happiness, to be able to access it. But could a lot of it be, as you're saying, they have something that's holding them back about this basic fear about doing what they really want to do?
You mean really want to do in what way?
Well, for example, let's say they naturally want to become happier, but happiness is about other people, or happiness is about doing what we really want to do at work and all,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't have, let's say, the courage to make the changes in themselves, to confront other people, to confront themselves.
Yeah. Well, that's a good fear-based thing.
Okay, let's see. Now, with a lot of your clients, I imagine, you're constantly working on resolving their issues, understanding their lives, their past and their present, how that's going to influence their
Mm-hmm.
future. And let's say, you might be working with certain clients who, let's say, want to succeed. Let's say they want to make it through college, or they want to make it at the job of their dreams. But, according to the research, more education, more success generally doesn't make for more happiness. It certainly can. There are many of us who gain our happiness through making more money or becoming success. But in general, it doesn't. So what do you say to those clients who kind of are so honed in on achieving these goals that maybe they're missing the point of what they really want?
Well, that's a programming thing. Their brains have been hardwired either through, childhood experiences, or they've been driven into this place where they have to be a success. So you can't stop going to school, and you can't stop making money. You have to, that's your enjoyment. If you don't derive pleasure from that, there's something wrong with you. So this is a feeling people, are going to grow up with.
So what do you say to them? Because I know society is definitely driving them toward, get that job, get that more money and all. I think
that's what's going on with young people today. When you have a lot of young people just living home till they're about 30 years old, going, I don't want to get out and get a job. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to punch this clock. It doesn't mean anything to me. That's what we're missing. We're missing that life has to have some meaning for people. If they don't have any meaning when they get up every day, they're going to lose motivation. They're going to develop a set of symptoms. If they don't have an organic, mental disorder, then they're going to develop some kind of a, lag in just moving forward.
All right, then what's the process of let's say a client is missing that meaning from their lives. They're just they're doing the step by step of their daily routines, but they're just missing the big picture. How do you introduce that concept to them, and what are the steps in helping them to understand that?
Well, they generally understand it on their own after a couple of sessions. When you do an intake with someone, you really cover everything just slightly so that they have an idea. It's kind of psychoeducational. When they leave the office, they kind of go, gee, I talked about that for a second, but that's something that now I'm thinking that's pretty heavy. I need to think about that. What's going on? They may come in a week later, or if they need to come in sooner, or call and say, I thought about that, and That's a big, heavy issue that I never, ever thought was important. I've had a client just come back to me recently after he was out of treatment for about 8 months and called up and said, I got to talk to you about it. Came in yesterday and said, you know what? I just realized that I'm like, you know, I made the wrong choice a long time ago. I never even talked about this stuff to you. And now I'm realizing this is an issue. I got to fix this. So it's so fascinating that the process never ends. I mean, you leave the office and people don't really stop the wellness process, that wheel that turns toward, you know, getting happier, because now they're doing their own self, you know, inventories. And it leads them to just, you know, rediscover things about themselves and explore things, you know, hold it up to the light, take a look at it in different, you know, different ways.
Yeah, because I think in a certain sense, you know, we in our normal conversation, we might be talking about sports, or we might be talking about our job or what's on TV and all, but I think most of us are just not familiar with talking about the dynamics of our psyches and what's actually going on in us.
It scares the hell out of everybody.
Yeah. So I think what basically you're doing is you're educating them in this new way of thinking about themselves and talking about their lives.
And sometimes we don't have anyone to talk to about these things. You know, you don't want to burden a spouse, or your friends are like, yes, okay, you done yet? Can I talk about myself now? So you really, and your kids, you know, they're sort of, I have so many parents that really don't have anyone to talk to. They end up talking to their kids, and their kids are like going, you know, okay, a little too much information for me. I don't need to hear this. You need to find someone, you know, you can go to, who can present a set of skills to you that you can use to really, you know, divert your energies away from burdening your children or your spouse with things, and just go outside of that network to get some help.
Cool. Okay. Now, I imagine like the psychotherapeutic process, you know, it's got to, I think, at times present, you know, the client with some pain. I mean, if they're going through, like, you know, their devastating childhood or something like that, it might not be the most pleasant. So what do you do to kind of like, what are the distractions like to happiness that occur within the session, and what do you do to kind of help clients kind of like face them and overcome them?
Well, it's funny because you can't really, in that process that someone is addressing pain, and then they visit that time back then, they visit that place where there's this container, and in the container you've been throwing all this pain and you seal it up, but you know, it never is tightly sealed enough. It's going to seep out. It's going to affect the way you relate to your people and yourself and your people and your environment. So that container, you know, is going to burst, or it's going to get, you know, it's going to open up in a session. And that's what we want. And we want to see anger and a lot of grief and tons of tears. I have stock in like Kleenex. I mean, there's enough Kleenex in my office probably to, you know, take care of a hurricane flood. But I mean, that's the process, and you're not going to get happy, you know, unless you do that. If you continue to contain this painful, you know, memories that are going to be triggered by society every single day, you're going to walk down the street, somebody's going to say something, somebody's voice might trigger something from your past, something you're seeing, something you smell. You're going to revisit this place that has all of this pain. So it's going to trigger it right there on the spot, and you'll see people suddenly spacing out, and you'll, okay, what's wrong with that person? And what they're doing is maybe they're dissociating for a moment because they're re-experiencing something. So you have to empty all that out for someone to get to the happiness part of their lives. If they don't get to the happiness part, well, you know, they'll get there eventually, but maybe not that session.
Well, let me ask you something. I mean, do you experience it like sometimes this client will just like break down, tears, you know, anger stuff, and then like a few minutes later, thank you so much, Claudia. That feels so.
No, they never thank me. They'd rather kill me.
No, I'm serious. Like, do they recognize? Is
I'm
that
serious?
So all right, so like it'll take time. So that immediate experience is gonna be like unpleasant for that session, but like maybe like a week or a month or a year later, they'll understand the value of it.
Yeah, okay. Or maybe by, you know, that night when they get home from their car ride, hopefully they get home. Okay, some people you don't want to leave too soon after that, especially when this is attached to some tremendous trauma that was experienced, especially during formative years, you know, prior to maybe 11, if it was very traumatic. If somebody has post-traumatic stress disorder, I mean, and they suddenly have a cathartic event in your office, you know, you don't want to let them go anywhere. You know, you might want to have them hang out, have a back office where I might say, why don't you just chill out and take a little nap? I just have a client that had so much stress that so much trauma that she'd come in and sleep because she never felt safe even sleeping, someplace where she was living. I mean, that never even worked for her. So even that's psychotherapy. If someone can come in, feel safe enough to lie down and go to sleep with you in the office, that's progress. You might say, "Are you getting paid for this? Are you kidding me?" No, that's progress, because safety it's a big part of healing.
Okay, Claudia, life is about happiness.
Absolutely.
Clients come to you for happiness, and you're there for not just their happiness, but your happiness as well. But of course, the process of psychotherapy can be painful. So and you're seeing various clients each day. What do you do as a person yourself to be able to help them through that pain and still maintain your great happiness?
I don't know. It's all about drugs. No, I get drunk. No, it's just, I think I'm kind of wired to, I'm an athlete. I've always been an athlete. So I always had these, little outlets for myself. And I think that I just distract myself from, and I also got very good at, initially when I first started in private practice about 15 years ago, I just couldn't do that. I just would leave the office and be like, yeah. Okay, I can't do it. I can't function. I can't know that this happens to people in this world, that people do that to people or children, and then just go to sleep and go, I'm fine, No way, I can't do it. So all of a sudden you become, you have your own therapist, of course, by the way, very key. You got to have your own shrink. And then it's just some point you just learn how to shift that gear, because if you want to keep doing what you're doing, you have to be available for that person. You can't be so wound up in your own issues that you can't help someone. So, and you have to always know that what you're doing for them is helping them. So, I think that having a therapist is A. That's a big A. B is, you have to have your outlets. You have to have, a musician. I've also always trained and did something athletic. I ride horses. I sail competitively. A lot of things that are, that turn me on. That kind of, it's a healthy distraction. It challenges me, in a fun way.
And I guess, in a certain sense, like, for example, surgeons have to, I imagine, learn to do this. They learn to kind of, in a certain sense, disassociate their emotions from their work.
Yeah.
So for you it must be difficult, because you have to balance that with showing and feeling real empathy, real understanding, while maintaining enough, intellectual distance, I guess, to really be able to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And it works. So here's a question. This is, I think, I consider this somewhat of a very progressive question in a sense, because it's going to be leading up to something we're going to be talking about later. The idea is all right, you do this for yourself, right? And it works. Could it be possible to educate the client to kind of, in this Zen, this kind of Eastern way of seeing their own life as an observer, so that they're kind of basically analyzing their life in the same way you analyze their life, so that there may be some pain, but that pain might be minimized or lessened?
So the question is, how do you guide them to do that?
And if that's possible, yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Zen, because I'm a big Zen Buddhist. I read a lot of that material, and I trained in the martial arts for many years, and that is a great way to help somebody to refocus, because I think organized religion is good, but it really does separate all of us so much, and I just believe that if you could just have a little something to fall back on, to kind of think, okay, this is a general concept that I can relate to. And then, that's one way to help somebody continue to move forward, take them out of that preset, belief system that they depend on. But I think I forgot to answer your question.
Well, no, you're on it, because then what the next question would be how would that play out in the client's life? They're looking at their pain, but they're looking at it from a different perspective, the perspective of an observer. How would that work out? Let's say for their disappointments, or their memories, their perhaps unpleasant memories. How would they do that?
So how would they address this stuff, and how do they dismantle it so that they can function better?
How would they address it in a way that the same way that you kind of are addressing their issues with them?
How do they do it on their own when they're out of the office?
In a way that kind of minimizes or lessens the pain. Because again, we were talking about how when you are treating them, you have to, for your own happiness and well-being, maintain a certain observer or a certain kind of a distance from all the pain they're feeling. So is there a way for them to kind of like see their own life, see their own pain?
Step outside,
exactly.
You mean, and look back?
Exactly.
Well, I think as they describe to me a painful experience, that's one of the things that they're doing. Because they're not revisiting this incident. Although if the trauma's been bad enough and there's a lot going on, then perhaps they may jump back in there for a moment and you want to keep them out of it, because they need to tell the story. So telling the story is often a great way to distance them from what happened. Writing about it, I have people keep journals. I think writing about what happened. Sometimes you can't even tell me what happened, so you might want to write about it, or write a few themes of it, or one word, and then give it to me in a session, and I can go fishing, pretty much. But when somebody's, it's hard to distance yourself. I mean, when you were bringing up surgeons before, I always get so annoyed at that process, because you're telling somebody, their dad is going to die, and, it's like, okay, well, I got to go now. And I always said, when I finish my degree, I'm going to go and teach. I'm going to go to med school, and I'm going to write up a program for, and I did. I wrote it up, a whole outline for a course that physicians could tremendously benefit from. It's interpersonal skills, Some people are just not designed. I mean, if you're really good at going into the brain and fixing things, well, sometimes you're not good at much else, But it doesn't hurt to have a couple of skills you can pull out at that moment that would really help you to sustain this person's grief, so that they're not alone with it, Because
absolutely.
That's where hopelessness comes.
Well, yeah, and that's very important, I guess, to general practitioners who really don't, go through the training that a psychotherapist would go through to be able to empathize and all.
Yeah, and it's just really you have to engage someone, engage with their story, engage their process, and then B, sustain it. Somebody starts, really falling apart and having a lot of emotions. You can't go, okay, time's up. Let's schedule you for next week. You have to sort of be there. You got to be where the client is all the time. Got to be there. Can't change up pitches in midstream.
Okay.
A sports analogy for you.
Hey,
it's Gary.
Some time ago, we did a show, Happiness Therapy, and it basically highlighted the work of an Italian researcher, Giovanni Fava, who has pioneered using happiness as a therapeutic technique.
And he has a great tomato sauce as well.
No, right. But what this is about is that there's kind of like, in a certain sense, two ways of going about one's happiness. One is to kind of like to understand one's problems, to get out the pain and stuff. And as our negative emotions diminish, naturally that's going to pave the way and allow the positive emotions.
Beautifully put, Giorgio.
Thank you. Now the other way, though, and this is a bit more progressive, what Dr. Fava is experimenting with is that as we focus on happiness, we hone in on what we want, that goal.
Yes.
And learn how to achieve that, then these negative emotions, whatever they might be,
useless to become useless.
Yes, and in a pleasant, in a more pleasant process in a certain sense than going through the more traditional sense of resolving the issues and understanding all our conflicts. So what do you think of that technique, and what do you think it has, its potential utility as a more standard practice?
I think that's what I do. I think that's what a lot of therapists do. And once I got past, I have to do this. This is what the book says, and I became more interested in being in touch with what works for me, what's natural for me, so that I can really engage with someone and really get the work done. Brief-focused therapy. I think that naturally occurs, what you described, that people let go of, of what they've been using and the choices they've been making, and and sort of like that heaviness associated with everything, because it becomes useless. And people have these things in place because they depend on them. It helps them get through the day. So, rather than, it's much better to just sort of try something new, but you can't say, let's try it a different way. You can have a cognitive behavioral treatment plan, but then unless somebody really finds something not serving them well anymore, some behavior, then they don't relinquish it. But I think the goal is happiness. Someone may not come in and say the goal is happiness, but they'll come in and say, this is what's miserable in my life, and you'll guide them through the process where they let go of what keeps them stuck, shackled where they are,
And do you find that, I think most clients would go into therapy with with a mindset that has been molded by our culture, by our media. So, I mean, is part of your work to really kind of like redefine how they view life?
Absolutely. Reframing everything is a big part of what I like to do. There's always some underlying change that you know, people haven't thought of before. But, you know, it's really funny because society does get people started. I mean, now there's so many shows about getting help. That's what I love about television. There's a lot I don't like about it, but what I do like when The Sopranos came on, that I'd be the best. Tony Soprano had a shrink. How uncool was it for anybody from that walk of life? And I'm Italian, and my father never spoke to a shrink, you know. And, you know, they talk to people in the family. That's how people got help in my culture. But Tony Soprano, big tough Tony, he had a shrink. So believe it or not, during that period of time when that show first aired, people were calling out of, you know, out of left field to come in. I don't know why. I was connected to a lot of the Teamster, you know, a lot of the Teamster insurance groups. And right after 9/11, actually, a few of them recruited me because I have a post-traumatic stress training. And so all of a sudden, there was an influx of calls. And this type of person type of client never came into my practice before, was coming in and saying, I don't know if you can help me, but this is what's going on. It's, you know, and I found that's the easiest client for me to work with, maybe because my dad was a Teamster, and I was comfortable with that level of, you know, dialogue, and I can hear things that might have scared someone else and not freak out and kind of just say, gee, I don't know, should I leave now, or should I get a gun? I'm not sure. How should I manage this in the future? It's sort of, you know, it's a very interesting process, and I'm going off. Am I on target?
No, you're very intuitive. We've got about a minute and 20 seconds left. And one last issue I wanted to address before we close briefly is that, like, you know, in terms of getting people more comfortable with the process, you have like Dr. Phil's show where people are actually going through that process on
that's
there.
Great. I'd love to do that. I hope we have some shows like that. If someone would sign a waiver and come in, and we can do a little bit of an intake. You know, it certainly doesn't want to be too, you know, too scary for our viewers, but or for George.
Claudia, that is an excellent idea.
I think it would
we
be
have
great,
to do that. Yes.
You know, and I think people then can see, wow, okay, let me think about doing this again. There's so many resources, people, right here, and we can give resources, all kinds of places. People
we're going to do this. We got to do this. Okay, and we're gonna like hone them in on, like, yeah, you're going to solve your problems, but remember, happiness is where we're going. Right?
That's right. Let's get back to the show. If you're not happy, Mr. Happy can help.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Claudia.
You're
this has
welcome.
been a great show. Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life. This is George and Claudia saying, think well, be good, feel very happy, and I hope you'll join us next time here on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful. It's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.